Car Chronicles. Howdy. How are you guys doing? My makeup is a little glossy because it's so humid out here and I'm borderline sweating. I'm getting ready to wipe this off. But I just wanted to talk about um, decentering men because I'm losing hope in marriage and relationships. And I know why I'm losing hope in marriage and relationships. And I know the solution. So continue to pray for me because I'm praying for myself because I know why I'm losing that hope in relationships and marriages because I have been hurt many times before and I've seen others that I love been hurt many times before in relationships, both men and women. And I've seen people treat marriage like it is a literal piece of paper, and um, and relationships, people just want to use you up and toss you out. And I've been the woman that seems like I can date a guy for an extended period of time and be everything that this man want in a woman. Then we break up, and then he turn around and be married to somebody totally different. All right, I've been there. I actually been there 5 times. And it wouldn't be like a female in between and then get married. It'd be right after me. And I know what people are saying. Oh, well, he wasn't the one for you and blah, 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 blah. I get that, right? But after a while, when you start to see the same pattern over and over again, you start to wonder, is this me, right? And to some degree, it is, all right? It is me. I put all eggs in the basket. I'm all in relationships. You know, I get anxious and excited too easily when I sense that a little piece of a man is giving me some kind of attention, and whether it just be him just flirting or him being charismatic or him actually being interested. I get so excited so fast, so early, and I feel like that my excitement might force him into thinking that, oh man, I gotta like this woman. And there's that. And then there's the whole concept that I've painted a picture that, like, hey, I'm ready to date, I'm ready to be in a relationship. And I'll tell you, the last guy that I had a small stint with, he basically was cool with having sex, even though he said that he doesn't bring it up and all this other stuff. He was cool with having sex um, until he decided that he was ready for a relationship. And I'm not looking for that. I'm not into me doing that, until you decide you're ready for a relationship. No, we're not giving that out for free. Like, that's crazy talk. Um, but then before that, I was in a relationship with a guy who I thought was going to be married because he just, says I was this good woman and all this other stuff. And here's where the tough part comes in. So even though around the time my mother transitioned, um, we were already on the outs, but we were still kind of in close communication a little bit. But, in that essence of transition of my mother from a earthly being to, resting with Jesus. In that time, and this is my fault, I own this. In that time, I did hold up a high expectation, thinking that even though we were no longer together, that I assumed that he would be kind of like the closest piece of comfort that I needed at that time. Even though, like I said, we were on the out. He didn't have to, but I blame myself for putting that expectation on him. Little did I know that there was a lot of other stuff going on. I did not know that, but I just assumed the good in him and thinking that, maybe, he'd just be, the closest thing to an intimate partner until I figure out what grief is going to look like for myself. And I admit I didn't get that. I didn't get that. And there was a lot of bitterness. There was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of unforgiveness there at one point. And I need for people to realize that you gotta forgive. everything and anything. Okay. Like, and I know that there's, situations where injustices have happened. And I'm not saying that you giving forgiveness, I think I talked about this in the video, but I'm not saying that you giving forgiveness permits what they did. It's not permissible as okay, right? But you have to forgive, because however, it's almost like unforgiveness is a seed, and that seed is going to grow in a number of negative things in how you view relationships, right? Especially if it's a situation where somebody that you trusted or confided in or were told to confide in, did a sexual injustice, right? And you have to, it is a seed, because it can grow, and not only can it grow into like bitterness and resentment and how you operate and to behavior issues, but it can also manifest itself as chronic illnesses and diseases, according to various prophets and prophetess that I've listened to, just hearing from God and connecting with them about said topic. So all that unforgiveness is a literal seed, and those are essentially the roots that come from that seed. But through God's help, you have to know how to cut that off. Like you basically have to take that seed of unforgiveness and literally take it out the ground. Like it's not that you just cut the roots. I mean, you allow the roots to dig deep and help you navigate to where the seed lies, but you almost have to put your hand in the soil, right? You gotta get dirty. Catch me on this. You gotta get dirty. You gotta get your hands dirty. You gotta get in there and dig deep and pull that unforgiveness seed completely out. Uproot it, pull all the roots it created, pull everything out. That's what you have to do. But if you are in the gardening or anything of that nature, if you know how deep a seed can go, right? And, as roots and more ground and more grass grow onto it, it can go deeper and deeper. And, more ground could be essentially just time. Years upon years and months upon months, weeks and days, where it pushes that seed lower and lower and lower and lower into the ground. And you got to really dig. You got to let those roots take you back to that seed of unforgiveness, and you got to pull it out. You got to pull it out. So you're going to get dirty. You're going to expose some stuff on the way. You're going to expose the dirty stuff on the way to that seed. You're going to come across some obstacles to get it out, right? But you got to get it out. And I know that actually what people need to realize is that what happened between the gentleman and I at the time of my mom's transition, and I don't want to take away the credit. So he did reach out to me afterwards, but now this is on me. The way he initiated those conversations after my mother's transition was not okay. I don't deem them as okay. And that's essentially where my perspective of him changed at that point. Definitely did. It made me feel like that he didn't care about me like he said he did. It made me feel like that he didn't care about what was happening to me, what I was going through, because again, he was doing his own thing. Okay. It just made me feel like, in previous years, because I've been with this guy for years, he was the only man I was with the whole time that, him and I were together per se. He made me feel like that I have been feeling in different occasions and different events throughout the duration of him and I being together. And I didn't like that feeling. And I didn't like that feeling coupled with me dealing with grief and so many transitions after that. And so because of that, because of his lack thereof, or not even, I don't want to say lack, because he tried to reach out to me. It's the support that he gave that made it seem like that he was doing a task. I felt like that I was on his list of to do things. Oh, let me try to show Patrice that I, care about her. Or let me show Patrice that, I'm concerned about her. Now, I'm not the judge here. I can't say whether he was or was not, but his actions did not depict that. And usually you have to be mindful of people's actions. And I know that, maybe he didn't know how to navigate through that. I'm not sure. I would never know. Him and I don't communicate. But I think it was just the actions itself that made me feel like that, I was on an island by myself. And, I depend on my siblings, but at the time, I was kind of like their mother figure. So you can only really depend on that side so much. And, my mom's spouse at the time, he was going through his set of issues. Obviously, he just lost a spouse. And friends that I just couldn't connect. And so I struggled, and I don't blame anybody but myself, because there were things that I permitted with this guy that, that kind of left me where I was stranded on this island. And so essentially that's kind of the reason why I kind of losing hope in marriage and relationships, because, I have to work on myself to make sure that the bitterness or any type of unforgiveness that's left over is not forcing me into a mindset to think that the man should always be a mind reader. I definitely don't want that. You know what I'm saying? Because, you shouldn't expect that. You shouldn't expect a man to be a mind reader. But I think in his case, I think that, after being with somebody for so long or for an extended period of time, they should know me. And I didn't get that. So, essentially when you're praying to God about unforgiveness, now I have seen multiple videos and podcasts about the, dangers of holding on to unforgiveness. That is a very real conversation. It is a very honest conversation. And you got to let go of unforgiveness. Like when I say you got to follow the roots. So let's say, for example, if you all of a sudden noticing that you got a, addiction to food. I'm just going to say addiction to food because it's safe. You know what I'm saying? Safe on these interwebs. You have an addiction to food, right? And then when you really start realizing that you're getting sick, right? That's another root. You're getting sick from excessive eating, and you're not able to be active. Another root. So when you become active, you try to find the root of what's keeping you from losing weight. Maybe I'm eating too much. That's the other root. So then if you are pulling up that you're eating too much, then you could dig deep into that root and say, okay, I'm going to follow this root all the way down to its seed. And then you discover that seed comes from burying years upon years. So that seed is deep, 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 years upon years upon years of unforgiveness. And then you got to do the dirty work to pull it out. That's just what it is. And essentially that, I think that's kind of what I've permitted. I've permitted just, the loneliness, because at one point I kind of was the only child for a hot second. And, then the elder millennial, and then, losing my dad at a young age. And it's just like, it's like the unforgiveness and the loneliness and the, the heartache and all that other stuff, it buried those seeds deeper and deeper. So then you come to a situation like grief. You lose your other parent, you know what I'm saying? And then you're left to figure out, well, how do I navigate through this? What do I need to do for myself? Or what do I need to do now? Life is different. I have none of my parents, I have no surviving parents right now. I have no surviving grandparents right now. And you have to ask yourself, okay, what is my identity? Parents are gone, grandparents are gone. You got to figure that out. And I think those situations will help you pivot to really pull out those roots to discover who you are. Who you are before the heartache, and who you were before the bitterness, and who you were before the unforgiveness, and who you were before any type of addiction, or who you were, before you was just walking around here mad all the time, angry all the time. And, those things are important. Those things are important. But me personally, losing hope in marriage does not say that God cannot turn things around. I know God can turn things around because I've seen him do it before countless amount of times. But knowing that, there's pieces of me that desire the relationship and that desires marriage, there's aspects of me that I have to work on between me and God. For example, I am working on, when it comes to me dating and relationships, I am working on the aggressiveness part of myself, because sometimes when I approach relationships or I approach, the possibility of dating, or I might have a crush on somebody, I still act like probably the 12-year-old Patrice, and I just want to be aggressive. You know what I'm saying? And that aggressive does not need to be like you hitting somebody. I ain't doing that. But the aggressiveness could be, trash talking. It can come in the form of you always talking trash. You always just, and I'm not talking like people that know me. No, I got a mouth, okay? But and sometimes that mouth comes out when I just feel that aggressive nature. And so I am in my quiet time and talking to God, I'm learning how to be quiet. I'm going to say that, quiet. And wait the process out, but being mindful of every action that, men take to want to be pursuant of a relationship. And, I think, and I also think about myself, and here's the other part where I lose in hope is knowing that I am the way I am professionally. It's a lot of, because I am in a leadership role where I work, and I am the eldest daughter. I am I'm the one with the most amount of degrees currently. And that hopefully in the next couple of years, there'll be another relative with the doctorate degree. But right now I am the sole relative with a doctorate degree. And I have a pretty good leadership role where I'm at. But those things can, as a woman, put you in a masculine space. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but just being in a masculine space, and I'm already in a masculine major, right? I'm already in a masculine profession. And just kind of those two things coupled together can bring about a sense of, assertive. I don't want to say aggressive or anything like that. It could bring an assertive nature, and some men don't like that. But I'm not here to say that I'm about to appease the masses. You know what I'm saying? If you don't care for my assertive nature, I don't know what to tell you. But there's nothing wrong with being assertive, but being quiet. So, for example, I was in a meeting today with a group of leaders, right? And I spent a lot of time being quiet. That's now being quiet, of course, when the time is right. You know what I'm saying? Not always speaking up and all this other stuff, but being quiet when the time is right until, something pops off that is misrepresentation or misinformation or somebody saying something about you. Yeah, speak up. Don't sit there and let it happen. Sometimes though, I'll be letting people speak, not knowing that I'm in the room because they don't know, they've never met me. But anyway, that was fun to watch one time. But just kind of being an observant space. That's what I mean by being quiet. Because I don't want people to perceive quiet as submissive and permitting things to happen to them. No, being quiet and observant. Just sometimes you just gotta chill. You got two ears for a reason and one mouth for a reason, right? So, just observing, monitoring. And of course, if you are a praying individual, your discernment is high. But, just being mindful and just being quiet and just kind of reading the room. And then when it's your turn to speak up and say something, then say something. But all this to say that, like I said, there's hope in me no, I don't want to say maybe. I don't want to say that. There's hope to some degree. for me getting married and getting into a relationship. But in that hope, I want to make sure that I'm not dwelling on past things. I'm not going back to the things that turned me bitter or broke my heart, or maybe going to unforgiveness, but really focusing on pulling out that root and doing all the work that comes with pulling out that root. Because, who knows? God has a partner for me, or God may have called me to a life of singleness. I don't know. But, it's important because in 1 Corinthians, is it 1 Corinthians? Maybe, I think. It talks about, being content. Philippians, that's where it is. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Philippians, where it talks about being content where you are, right? But 1 Corinthians does highlight, like, hey, it's either 1 or 2 Corinthians where Paul talks about, hey, it's better to be single, because then you could put all your power and your focus onto doing God's work, being a servant for him and his kingdom, and put all your attention and your devotion into God. Because when you get married, your devotion is split. You fighting for that devotion. Even though, please don't get it twisted, that even with the change in the dynamic in relationships, God still should be first. But you are dividing up your time, as opposed to somebody who's single who doesn't have to divide up their time. Focus on God and the talents God gave them, the talents and the abilities that God gave them to help grow the kingdom. And so, even into just like, meeting a guy and let's say he wants to pursue a relationship, I want to be clear that we're not about to be dating 5-6 years. We're not doing that. You need to know whether this is it or not. And so I do pray that, I think honestly, and this is honest, I pray that, God helps me to cross paths with a man that is sure about me. 100% sure about me. That he has spoken to God enough and often and frequently that he won't miss out on the opportunity to know that I'm the one. That I'm the one God sent. Now, you got to be careful, because there's a lot of cats out there be like, God told me that you my wife. You sure? You got those. But I'm saying something that is just organic and just, it's like, it's like the Holy Spirit has spoke to you personally and said, yeah, that's it. That's what I pray for. I pray that God helps me to cross paths with someone who is sure about me. 100% sure about me. Not on the fence, not saying I got potential, nothing of that nature, but he is 100% sure about me. In the meantime, between time, be out here in these 2025 streets, enjoying life, praising God along the way, of course. But you guys have a great day.